Rajesh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I want to ask why we need to admit everyone to in the lobby, like lobby waiting. Then I have to admit that person. Then they will join. So is
Yes,
that easy?
yes, please. Because see, I have invited everyone, right? And this is something kinds of a protected meeting. So whoever is joining, I'll need to. Okay, someone who is not speaking, can you please go on mute? Kiran, I think. Mm, okay, cool. So yeah, so this is the reason, because this is kinds of a protected meeting. So I'll need to admit them from the lobby. Okay.
Okay, means anybody can admit that, right?
Not anybody. I think, I guess only me, but for that part I'll need to check it out. Okay, so someone, Archana is waiting. Can someone try to let her in?
Yeah, I
Mm,
think already admitted because I
okay,
have
so
Yes,
already
sir,
admitted
done.
the person.
okay, who has done this?
Me, Shashank, sir.
Okay, Shashank. Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah,
Yes.
fine. It's like anyone can admit anyone. Fine. So let's say, even if I'm focusing on a course content, anyone can, if anyone is requesting to join the meeting, anyone from you can admit them as well. Okay, cool. Thanks. So let's do one thing. Let me show you some things. Let me just share my screen. Just give me a sec. Okay, my screen is visible, right?
Yes, Rajesh.
Yes, it is. Okay, cool. Thanks. And one request to everyone, whoever is not speaking, please go on a mute so we don't get a extra noise from your side. Cool. So the thing is, we had already discussed about the course content and how we will proceed, how will be our workflow, like what are the interaction types that we will require, I'll require from you, and how we will proceed throughout the course, what is final projects, and all these things we had discussed in a welcome session. So those who was not able to make it to the welcome session, you can just go and check out the recordings. So this is the folder I have provided access to everyone. We have 4 folders here. The first is assignments, second is recordings, resources, and a slide. So all of the weekly assignments will be available inside this folder. Assignments will be weekly basis, so there will be probably 5 assignments for the 5 weeks. uh, for the recordings, it will be structured like this: is a welcome session recording, you can just go and check it out. And for each week, the corresponding week's recordings will be inside the week's particular folder. For, let's say, for the this week, will all the recordings will be available inside this folder, and for next week, all the recordings will be available inside the week 2 folder. Okay. And this, in this resources folder, I'll place some resources that I find it useful. Let's say, for example, some activity life cycle, or like what is a work manager, or all those kinds of things. If we have some images or some links or some videos, so resources that can help you to understand things easily, that I'll keep it here. And this, the fourth folder is the slides. So how we will proceed, we will have a slide for each session. So what I'll do, instead of directly placing the slides here, I'll keep the links to the slide here. So even if I modify the slide at the later point of time, you will always have the latest data and not the older one. Okay, so I'll place all the slides link here in this folder. So this is how our content will be organized. And the second thing is about the repository, right? So this is our repository where we will host all of our code. And I believe most of you have already accepted the team invite, so you can you will have access to this repository. This URL is in the group description as well, so you can go and check it out. So okay, and those who are yet to accept the GitHub invitation, you can uh, you can just go and check it out. Check out the invitation, so to get the access to this repository. So this is where we will store our code. So before we begin, let me ask you a few questions. Is there anyone who is not comfortable with the Kotlin? Anyone? Do we have anyone who is not comfortable with the Kotlin?
I can be the
Yes,
one.
Rajesh, I'm not comfortable with Kotlin.
Okay, Sai.
And Neil.
The lady that spoke. Secondly, I'll come to you soon. Just give me a sec. Okay, Sai. So like, how is your status? Are you familiar with the basics, or you don't even know at all the Kotlin?
So basically, right now I just started with tutorials. Earlier, right now, I'm currently a senior software engineer at a B2B unicorn startup. Right, actually, I
Okay.
work on JavaScript, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't have much knowledge of syntactical knowledge of Kotlin. So I'm just, matlab, started learning it.
Okay, okay. So you have, I think we already had a talk, right? You have 4 years of experience around. So
Yes, yes, yes.
yep, definitely. So I've provided some resources in the group as well for learning Kotlin. So you should not be facing any trouble learning them, and it would be just easier, just like learning any other programming languages. So for your side, like I'm fine because you will definitely learn it in around a week. Okay, who was next? One
Neil.
lady, Meenal. Yes, Meenal.
Yeah.
You two are not comfortable with the Kotlin.
I know the basics because I have recently cleared the Android development interview, so I'll
Mm-hmm.
be on it. But um I have same issues with syntax.
Okay, okay, cool. Okay, syntax is fine. It's something we can always understand later as well, or I'll try to explain the things as well if I find that it is just something confusing for Java developers. So definitely you have I think around 10 years of experience as well. So you should,
Yes.
yes, right, 10 years.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you should be fine with the Kotlin as well in the coming weeks. Fine. So I will do it. This is the thing that we are going to use a Kotlin entirely in our code. We won't use Java, and I believe everyone is familiar with the Git and GitHub. I don't need to explain these things, but to just to give you a glance, this is a GitHub where we will store our code. And if you want to retrieve this code, what you can do is you can just go to Git, and uh, you can select this option called a clone. Okay, git clone, and you can just enter the GitHub URL here, and you can click on this clone. So you will have this project setup ready, okay, like this. But what we will do, this is our F folder, and it contains all the things, what to say, Gradle version catalogs and all the things. Let me go through it so I can understand. Should I explain these things first, or we should move on with the activity? Let me just check out the content. Yeah, let's go with some theoretical part first. It might be boring for some senior developers because you already know it, but this is necessary because we have a freshers as well. So I'll try to keep everyone on the same boat. So this is Android course, right? So Android, all of you know, Android is an open source operating system developed by the Google for mobile devices. Actually, it was developed by three developers or three builders, you can say, and then Google acquired Android in, I think, maybe in 2005. Okay, so it powers billions of the smartphone, tablets, smart TVs, and other devices. So Android is not limited to just smartphones. You can find it nearly everywhere, even on a tablet or TVs or other devices, or even on the auto, right? Android Auto. Even you can find the Android in the cars as well. So Android is a operating system that is spreaded across various numbers of the domains. Uh, okay, before I move on, I have another question as well. Is there anyone who is not comfortable in English? Like everyone is fine with English, right? Do we have anyone whose primary choice is Hindi? Just asking for the sake of explaining the things.
Some important things, like can you take any example in Hindi? Like it is okay. Like some important things, like when
Mm-hmm.
we go with the coroutines, the dagger head, that type of thing. Basics
Mm-hmm.
are okay, but then when you explain any advanced thing,
Mm-hmm.
so just explain a little bit about that thing.
Okay, sure, sure, Shashank. Yes, Kiran.
Uh, so if you are conveying things on Hindi, then can you please convey the same on English as well? I'm not too familiar with Hindi. So
Okay, fine, 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 no problem. So I'll definitely go with the English, but just for the sake of explaining a few folks, I'll translate it in a Hindi and explain them as well. So English speaking peoples, you are on the fine page, because I'll try to explain all the things in English as well. Okay, cool. So it is like Android is based on the Linux kernel, and it uses Java or Kotlin as a programming languages. uh, and you can use a C or C++ as well in Android development. If you want to build some native libraries and you want to make some JNI calls, but that is something not a regular Android developers uses. Okay, so the main two things are a Java and a Kotlin. And Kotlin is, by the way, it is the official programming language for the Android, right? So kinds of Java is a kinds of in a deprecation state. Not exactly deprecation, but something is Google is endorsing Kotlin more and more. So it allows developers to create applications that we all know, and we should not discuss more on that. Fine. So why Android? Because it has a growing market. You can see Android dominates the global mobile market share, and the next competitor is iOS, right? And apart, we only have two major OS, Android and iOS. Apart from these two, I don't think we have any OS that has a major market stack. And we have good job opportunities, as well as versatile development, as well as we have access to a large user base for app distribution called a Google Play Store, right? So this is a bit about the Android itself. So now before we move on to the development, we will need some tools, right? Because you cannot simply write code on a notepad or notepad plus plus. We will need an IDE. So Android Studio is the official IDE for Android app development. And if you are not aware about it, you can just search on Android Studio, and you can click on this first link. It will lead you to the official website called developer.android.com, and then you can download the latest version of the Android Studio. So if you download this Android Studio, the current stable version is a Flamingo, right? This one. But in this project, we are going to use the latest Canary version. Okay, so the Canary version you can download from this preview tab. You are fine with both of these things, either stable version or a Canary version, but it's just that I love Canary version, that's why I'm using the Canary version. And the difference is, for those who don't know, stable version is the most stable version. It will have a less chances of the bugs, but it will lack features that Android Studio team is currently working on. And on the other side, preview builds are released every week, almost every week, and it will have all the latest feature, but there are more chances of the bugs being present in the Android Studio. So that is something that is the trade-off you will need to consider before using it as well. If you are working on some enterprise product, let's say for your company, you should definitely go for the stable version, that is this one, this Android Studio. But we are going to use a Canary version here. So the current version is a Android Studio Hedgehog, and the latest table is a Flamingo for alphabetically F, right? And the beta version is a giraffe. So G comes after F, so we will have a giraffe, and after G we will have a H. So the Canary build is a hedgehog. So you can I'm using the hedgehog Canary 9. So this is something we are going with. But whatever we are building in this project or in this course, you are fine to use Android Studio Flamingo as well. Okay, so this is a bit of about the Android Studio. So it provides a complete set of the tools test for the building, designing, and testing Android application. And another important thing is it is based on the JetBrains IntelliJ uh, idea. So we have the company, by the way, JetBrains is the company who invented the Kotlin programming language. So they are in the business of selling the IDEs. Okay, and the most popular IDE from their side is the IntelliJ idea. So this whole Android Studio is built on top of the community edition of the IntelliJ idea. This is something you can remember as well. And these are some of the features: code layout editor, Gradle build system simulators. Okay, so do we have anyone who haven't used Android Studio in any time? uh, do we have anyone who have no idea what is this Android Studio, what is this AVD? Anyone? I believe no, because everyone should be familiar with that things, right? Okay, cool. And one important things is if there is a silence, if you have answer particularly yes or no or whatever, just let me know. If I'll find a nice good silence there, I will assume that answer is a positive, and I won't discuss more on that things. So keep these things in mind as well. Someone had raised the hand, right? Who was that? Shubham?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Yes,
actually,
please.
sir, I'm using the Chipmunk version currently into my Android Studio. That will be okay, or I have to download the Flamingo.
That should be fine. Chipmunk. Oh, chipmunk. That is a very old, right? Chipmunk. Then we had a
Yeah,
dolphin. Then we had a electric eel, and now flamingo.
yeah.
So I would suggest just go and try and check it out if that is working on in your in your chipmunk. If not, I would suggest to go with the um, what
Okay,
to say this flamingo.
okay, so fine, fine.
Okay, but just give it a try. It should
So,
be working.
so Rajesh, I'm having electric eel version. So is that fine, or shall I have to
That
update it as well?
E should be fine.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So this is a bit about the Android Studio, and I believe all of you have used that thing as well. Nice. So let's move on to a bit of the Android components. Let's discuss these things later. Let me first show you how to create a project. So you can go to file, new, and click on this new project. I know it sounds like a boring things, but this is necessary. Fine. So now you have two options, whether you want to start with the Jetpack Compose based projects or XML based projects. So XML is something that is around for a decades, and Android developers were used to build the UI with the XML views, okay, in using the XML language. But recently Google introduced something called a Jetpack Compose, which is a kind of a declarative UI. So in that you don't need any XML code to build the UI, and rather you can write you can generate your entire UI using just the Kotlin code. Okay, you can use any Kotlin syntax inside the UI. Let's say it's a for loop. Let's say you want to print 1 to 10 items. Okay, so you can just simply create a Kotlin for loop and create the UI for that, just plainly using the Kotlin code. There is no XML. So we will something see in the next week, because the entire next week we will discuss on a compose. And another thing is XML view. So this is something Google is asking, basically suggesting to move your applications to the compose, Jetpack Compose. Let's say if your application is a legacy application, and not legacy, but I would say almost all the major applications like are still are written in the views, right? Because compose is relatively new. So what Google is suggesting, that whatever the new code you are writing, try to use the compose for that. Okay, so in this session, sorry, in this week, we will stick with the XML. So you will have that idea as well. And from starting from the next week and throughout the whole course, we'll use compose only. So to create a new project based on the view activity, you can click on this empty view activity, and here you can give a name, and you can give a package name. Let's say package name is a Hadia Rajesh or my application. And language is whether you want to use Java or Kotlin. Let's go with the Kotlin. And What else? Yes, minimum SDK. So and one thing is, at any point, if I'm skipping something, let's say minimum SDK, so my intention would be that you already know what is minimum SDK. So if at some point of time I'm skipping something, and if you don't have any idea, just raise your hand and I'll explain it. So minimum SDK is basically what is the minimum Android version you want to run your applications on. So if I select Nougat, and if I try to install my application on a Marshmallow, that is Android 6.0, it won't install, and it will give error. Okay, so let's say I want to use minimum Android 7 to install these applications. And another things is in which programming language I want to generate my build.gradle file. So Gradle is basically a build tool. I'll try to explain more on that as well. So it is a build tool, and you have two options, whether you want to use a Groovy DSL or a Kotlin DSL. So earlier, or I think even in this session, a lot of folks may have not idea what is these things, or they may have idea but they haven't used these things. So if I use a Groovy DSL, the file generated will be build.gradle, and it will be written in the Groovy programming languages. Okay, that is this one, Groovy, Apache Groovy. So whatever the usual build file you see, it is written in a Groovy. So Groovy is basically a JVM language, just like Kotlin and Scala, as well as Java. Okay, so we are not going with that, and we will use a Kotlin for generating the build file. So the file name would be build.gradle.kts. See, the difference is here. Here there is no extension, but this is a KTS. Okay, let's go with that. Any question on these things? Groovy DSL or Kotlin DSL?
Sir, any difference between like any major difference between them?
Yep. So the difference is majorly in terms of the syntax, because these things will be written in a Groovy syntax, because both of these things are a programming language, right? Kotlin and Groovy. So the syntax will be different. These things will be written in a Groovy, as well as these things will be written in a Kotlin. So and another things is, if you use a Kotlin, the Gradle is claiming that and Intel. Okay, so someone please go on a mute who is not speaking. Yeah, it's interfering. Okay, cool. So Gradle and IntelliJ is claiming that if you use a Kotlin DSL, the ID suggestions will be better, uh, suggesting for the build file. But I haven't noticed that things personally, because even in a Groovy DSL, maybe I haven't explored it much. I have used it quite extensively, and even for the large projects as well. But I think it's a kinds of the suggestions is kinds of a same, but the things is I believe that Kotlin is a beautiful language in itself, so I find build files more beautiful written in the Kotlin. And the second is, I guess there is maybe not sure, but performance issue is there. I think because Groovy is since when the Gradle born, right? So and they have recently added a nice Kotlin support, but I think Groovy DSL has a slight edge in terms of the performance compared to Kotlin DSL. Okay, so Gradle is working on that, and they are claiming that Gradle 8.0 is a very perfect option. You should go for the Kotlin DSL, but still I think Groovy DSL has a bit of the edge on the performance side, just a bit, nothing more. Okay.
Okay, so these days, big firms are using Kotlin DSL or
As
Groovy.
of now, no. As of now, no, because all the usual projects are written in a Groovy, and even if they start a new projects, there will be a lot of because in a or large enterprise projects, build files are literally, what I've seen is literally kinds of a programming files. They have variants and task and all those things. So build files spans across hundreds or thousands of lines. So usually if they're like developers are familiar with the Kotlin DSL, they will definitely go with that, or otherwise they can go with the Groovy DSL as well. So it's not like that organizations are moving away with Kotlin, sorry, Groovy DSL. They are still using it even in the new projects as well. But the studio as well as Gradle recommend to use a Kotlin DSL. Okay, does that answer right?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, cool. So, okay, let's go with the Kotlin DSL. And DSL is, by the way, just a domain specific language. So let's start a new project. Mm, where did it went? Yep, here, right? So this is our the project generated from the template. Let's keep it for now, and let me show you a few things here. So this is our project, and this is how you build the projects, and a bit of the things about the Gradle. So what is a Gradle? So Gradle is a build system that Android Studio used to build the files. What is a build system? So let's say when you were working on a in your college, right? In your college you will have a Java courses and all those things. So what you were used to do, you were let's say if you have created a file called hello world, something like this, hello world. So what you were used to do, you were used to compile that using a Java C option, and then you will need to compile a hello world dot java, those kinds of things, right? And then you will need to run using a Java interpreter, something like a hello world. So these steps we were doing the manually, right? So let's say we are building an Android application, we will have a hundreds and thousands of files. This Android activity is a Kotlin file, right? So I am not going to compile it manually for every activity, for every service, for every classes. I am not going to run these files manually. That is something I'll delegate to a build tool. Okay, so Gradle is basically build tool. It does more than these things, but just to give you a idea, it first it let's say it compiles your Java or a Kotlin files, check whether there is any error or not, and it then combine all of the resources that we are using. Let's say we are using some strings here, so Gradle will combine the strings. If we have some let's say images here, let's say this is a WebP image, right? So Gradle will combine all of these things, compile all the classes, all the activities, and create an APK, Android APK, right? So it is something like Android package. Yep, an APK. It will sign it, and then it will automatically deploy it to the running device. Okay, so that is the task of the Gradle here in the Android development. Gradle is basically a build tool. So build tool will do these kinds of things on your behalf. So you don't need to do these things manually. Okay, so our project is ready. So let's see what we have. This is our package name that we have already given. We have this class called a main activity, and it extend the app compat activity. Okay, so this is something a class that is provided by the Android SDK, and it this class internally extend these classes as well. Okay, so this class is useful when you want to build any activity, standard activity. Okay, so our main activity okay, so let's see what is activity. So activity is basically, it's a basic building block of the Android app UI. So it represents a single screen with user interface. So let's say this is our Android device, right? So whatever we see on a device at a time is known as an activity. Okay, so let's say here something is written, hello world is written, and on the there is some nice button called click me. So we have this button here. Fine. So all this part that represent a single screen is known as activity. This is an activity. When you open the let's say when you open the WhatsApp, that is one activity. Okay, so we have this default activity called a main activity, and activities goes through multiple cycles. So I'll explain that as well. So we have this we are overriding this function from the app compat activity. Okay, not from the app compat activity, basically from the component activity, or maybe activity class itself. So this extend fragment activity, and then this extend the component activity. So let's see. Yes, where do we have this? I think this is component activity. I think inside somewhere here we have that uh, what to say, on create method. So we'll see that things later as well. So whenever we want to initialize our UI, we just write a code like this. And to build the UI, we need to go to this res folder that stand for the resources, and inside the layout, this is our layout. Okay, so inside this layout, let's see what do we have. Let me click on this code. So you can see this is entirely written in XML, right? Extensible markup language. So we have some constraint layout here. As you can see, this the constraint layout is a kind of a root layout. Inside that root layout, we will have our child, and inside this we have this text view, regular text view, right? The hello world is written. So now what we will do is this is our XML UI, and this is our Kotlin code. So now what we will do, we will combine this XML with this Kotlin. So we have this function called a set content view. So what this will do, it will set the content for the activity. So this is the activity's content, and we are binding that content with the main activity. So what we will pass, we will pass r dot layout. So what is this r? So r basically is, r means resources. Okay, so all the resources that we have inside the res folder will have a unique id. So this is and we can access it by the folder name. Let's say we want to access something from the drawable, so we will write something like r dot drawable like this. Okay, if you want to access something from the layout folder, we will write something like r dot layout dot activity underscore main, basically this name. Okay, so this is how we are setting, connecting the XML with our activity. So now let me click on this run button, and another thing is okay, AVD. So what is AVD? AVD stands for the virtual device. Just like you have a physical device, right? Regular physical device. So instead of using them, we can create a virtual device. You can sorry, you can just go to device manager, and you can click on this plus button. You can select whatever device you want to create. This is a virtual devices. You can, let's say, select the Pixel 5, click on next, and here you can select the Android operating system version. Let's say I am going with the Android TRAM issue, that is API 33. I can click on next, and here I can set some properties, and I click on finish. So I have 3 virtual device created. Let me run this Pixel 7 using the API 33. So now I will have a virtual Pixel 3, Pixel 7 running on the Android T. Okay, you can see it here. I have the things ready. So I can select the device here from the running device window, and I can click on this run button. So once I run this, you will see this UI in the Pixel device. That means our activity is deployed. We have built an APK. Basically, Gradle did that for us, and it will install it on Pixel device, and then we will see this hello world option. Let's see. Okay, cool. So now you can see our application is installed, right? This is our what is the our application name? This made S03. Okay, sorry, my application, I believe. Yes, my application. Not this one. Oh, yep, this one. Fine. So this is our application that is deployed on the device. So now you can see this is Kotlin code, and we are connecting some XML code with that thing. So this is how you deploy, this is how you install any application on any device. Let me uninstall a few things first, so we don't get confused. Okay, so this is how activities works. Fine. And now let me show you a few things. You can let's say if you want to add some button here, so you can just select the button here. You can say, let's say, wrap content, and you can add some text here. Let's say click me, and now you can see a button is here, right? You can see the button is here. So this is the constraint layout. So all the layout are constrained with connection to each other. So let's say I want to, we are not going to deep inside the constraint layout because XML is not our main focus. Our focus is a compose. So I'll just show you a few things. Let's say we want to keep this button below the hello world, right? So how we will do it? We will just write something like this, and let's say, let me remove some constraint. Start and a top. Let's say let's remove this one, so it went here. And let me each things you can provide id to any element. Okay, so let's say this is our text view, so let's call it a my text, something like this. Okay, and let's say I want to place this button below this text view. So what we'll do, we'll select the constraint bottom dot let's say to bottom of sorry, a constraint top to bottom of. I'll explain, don't worry, huh? id my text view, let me remove this one. Cool. So basically here what we are doing is we want to place this button below the text. So what we are doing, we are first setting, we have four constraint, end to end, start to start, not a four but just combination of all this direction, top, bottom, start and end. So now let's say in horizontal fashion, this fashion we want to keep it on the center, right? So we will use a start and end to center of the parent. So this will place the button in the center. If I remove this one, it will jump to here, right? So basically it is horizontally centered in the parent, and parent is this constraint layout, that is this whole layout. But now what I want to do, I want to keep this button below this text view. So the top of this button, that is this one, will be the bottom of this text world, right? So basically top of this button, that is this portion, this point will be bottom of this one. So this is a text view and this is the bottom. So I'm placing that below the text view. So this is how you can understand it. If you run it, let's see how it looks. Okay, so now you can see, where did it went? Yep. So now you can see it is hello world, and you can say click me, and you can click on the button as well. So now how to make it interactive, right? So what we can do is we had a multiple option, the famous being the something called a find view by id, but this is kinds of deprecated. We had another something called a kotlin what to say, kotlin synthetics as well, and that is also deprecated as well. So to make the connection between I'm not focusing on much on these things because again focus is on compose, but to give you a glance, we will use a view binding to connect, to make this kotlin code and xml code talk with each other. So what is a view binding? View binding is something for each component, for each of this component we will use a view binding. So view binding library will create a few classes automatically for us, and using that classes we can type safely access the whatever the item we want to access, let's say text view or button or whatever. Okay, so to use a view binding, what you need to do, you need to just go to build file, and we will need to add something called a build features. And what we will need to do, we'll need to use a view binding equal to true. So using these things, we are telling the Android that we want to use a view binding feature. Okay, so now let's say view binding is enabled using the build feature. So now what view binding will do, it will generate a class for whatever activity we have. Let's say we have this activity underscore main. So how it will generate the class name, let's say its name is activity underscore main. So it will generate something like a main activity binding. Okay, or maybe sorry, activity main binding, something like this, activity main binding. So it will automatically generate a class for us using this binding. Okay, and so now let's say we want to now we have set up the layout, but we are not able to handle these things. Let's say upon clicking on this, I want to increment the counter here, but as of now I'm not able to do it, right? So let's do that things. Let's get that let initialize that class, let init where, and let's call it a binding, and it should be main sorry, activity main binding, right? You can see the class name here, something called activity main binding. So you can see activity capital A and underscore is removed, and then there is a main and there is a binding suffix. So this class is generated by the view binding library. It will be automatically generated. So what is the late in it? I believe some of you are available, sorry, not available. Some of you are familiar with this late in it, but those who are not, it's just that in Java, let's say in Java, you can do something like this, right? Let's say you can, just to give you a glance, let's say something binding, you can create object like this, right? Without initializing. But in a Kotlin, you cannot declare object without initialization. That is the biggest advantage of the Kotlin. You must have to initialize it the things to avoid the null pointer exception. So in Java, you can do such things, but in Kotlin, you can't. So now, as of now, inside this activity class, we don't have access to this view binding class implementation. Okay, or basically we don't have the actual generation for this class. So what we are telling the Kotlin compiler, that we are declaring this class, but as of now we are just declaring it, and at the later point of time we will assign some value to these things. Okay, so that is something that is why Kotlin is not complaining. If I remove this let in it, you can see there is some error, right? So it says the property must be initialized or must be abstract. So now we want to tell the Kotlin compiler that we are declaring this as of now, but at the later point of time we will initialize it. So now inside the on create activity, you will have access to the generated the main activity binding. So what we will do, we'll just do something like a binding equal to activity main binding dot inflat, and we will have access to layout inflator as well. So what is this layout inflator? So this layout inflator is basically, see, this is XML code, this is Kotlin code. My main activity says that, okay, I don't know what is this activity underscore main, and activity underscore main will be like, I don't know what is this main activity. Okay, we don't know each other. So the layout inflator, what will do, this class is basically responsible for the communication between these two things, XML and kinds of a I'm just trying to simplify the things. It will be responsible for communicating between this XML as well as a Kotlin code. Okay, so we have that access to that things. So we will inflate that layout, this entire layout, we will inflate the entire layout in the binding variable. Okay, so now instead of using the set content view, this line, what we will do, we will, let's say, let's get the view from the binding. Let's say uh, uh, was binding, yes, binding dot a root. So this is a root view. Root means basically the root of this view. So now what we will do is we will use a set content view, and here we will pass the root view. This is something we are getting from the binding, right? So this is something we did it. Now what is the benefit of it? If you use a binding view binding, you will have access to all the views that you have inside your XML. Let's say text view or button or whatever. See, let me give you an example. Let's say I can access binding dot sorry, binding dot see, you can see my text. I have access to my text, this one, as well as let's give ID to this as well. Let's say ID, and let's call it a my button. So now you will have access to my text as well as my button, right? You will have a typesap access. Typesap means it's automatically generated, so you don't misspell it, or if you do something like a my button dot one, let's say somehow by mistake you added one, right? So it will give you an error because yes, okay, I think we need to sync the project again. Okay, cool. So now you can access it a typesap basically without any human errors, because this all the components for this view is automatically generated. So let's say we want to create a, what to say, we want to create a click counter when we click on this button, and then it should update the value for this things. So why just keep eye on this example, because the same things I will explain in compose, but in the compose you will note that things works differently. So let's say whenever let's say binding dot my button, I want to handle click on this button, so I'll write something like a set on click listener and set on click listener. Okay, so for those folks who are still working with the Java, they may have things like something like a binding dot my button dot set on click listener, and then you will need to extend a new sorry, they'll need to pass something like a view dot on click listener and all those things. But in a Kotlin the things are simplified, right? Because Kotlin provides a good nice support for the Lambda functions. So you can just call this set on click listener, and here you have access to view means basically this button. So when let's create a variable called a counter. Okay, and let's assign 0 value to that counter. And whenever we click on this button, what we want to update the value of the text view. Let's say binding dot my text dot let's say text. If you are using Java, you can call this set text function, but in a Kotlin you have direct access to property as well, so you can just simply assign the value to it. So let's say what we'll do, we'll use something like a counter, and as we are using the string concatenation basically, right? In Java you do something like a something like this, like a mm, in Java you do something like this, right? So the string concatenation. So the same is being done in Kotlin using the string template, just like this. Okay, so yes, let's increment the counter as well. Whenever we click on this button, we want to increment the counter, and if we want to update the value, so let's set the default value. Click. Let's give the button a name as a click counter, and instead of the hello world, let's say count and 0. Let's say this is the default value. Okay, let me modify it, count something like this. Let's run this project and let's see what happens. Okay, so we are running the project, and you can see the count is a 0 because we are assigning the 0 value here, and when this is a click counter, so whenever we click on it, okay, you can see counter is +1, right? Because we are updating the counter value and then we are updating the text. If I again click on it, it should be 2 3 4 5, right? Just like this, if the counter is working. Whenever I click on this button, the count is basically incremented. So take note of these things, because the same thing won't work in a compose, and we will see why and how to make it work in a compose. So this is how we used to do using the XML, and this is how things work. Okay, so we have implemented a simple counter. So this entire things is an activity. Okay, the whole white screen you are seeing is an activity. We can have multiple activities as well, and we can navigate between them through some intents or some navigation libraries as well. We will discuss that as well. But to give you an idea, this activity that you are seeing here is mainly goes through internally. It mainly goes through 6 life cycle step. Okay, so to give you an idea, activity life cycle, let me show you some graphics so you will have a more idea. Mm, let me grab the graphics. Yep. Yep. Open image in a new tab. Okay, so this activity starting from the launch, let's say this is launch activity, right? And let me remove it from this is activity. Let me remove it from the recent screen. So now the activity is end and application ends, right? So when activity starts and it ends, it goes through different life cycles. So what are the life cycles? The first is on create. That is something you can see we are overriding, right? The on create method is we are overriding it. So what is on create? On create method will be called when Android system start Android system start to create an activity, let's say we are running these things on a Pixel device, right? So the Android system running on the Pixel device, when we first launch the application, this one, okay, let's say I'm launching this application. So now the Android system running on this Pixel created an instance of the my main activity. So the first method it will call is something called a on create. Okay, so this on create is called when Android system started creating the activity. So inside this we will set some default layout, as well as this binding, this click listeners and all those things. And one thing to note here is when on create is called, you won't be able to see the activity, although it is pretty fast and it only takes a few nanoseconds. But when this on create is called, that means activity is not visible. Okay, and Android system has just started creating that activity. The second is once the on create is called, Android system will quickly call the on start method. So on start means your activity or your UI is visible to user, but user is not able to interact with that. Let's say we are running this activity, right? Let's say activity, when I click on this, Android will call the on create method, and then it will click call the on start method. Okay, so when the on, now you can see I can interact with these things, right? I can click on this button, but when I was in on start method, I will be able to see the UI, but I won't be able to interact with the UI. Once the on start is finished, Android system will quickly call the on resume method. On resume simply means whatever you are seeing here, this means your activity is on resume state. It means activity is running normally, and now I can click on these things, interact with it, or do whatever I want. So these two things, on create and on start, will quickly finish, and on resume will stay in this state until something abnormal occurs. Okay, so now my activity is in on resume method. Okay, so now you can see after the on resume, Android system won't call any method if there is no abnormal things, and activity will be running. So this is the temporary method, or sorry, this method runs for a few just a nanoseconds, and this on resume will continue running until there is any abnormal things. So now let's say I'll explain these things with practical example as well, but let me just go with our theories first. Okay, so what I'm saying making sense for everyone, or is it like going over the heads, or like what the thing is?
Rajesh, one question here actually.
Yes,
So
sure.
as you said, on start we activity will visible, and on resume activity will interactive, right? Then we should
Yes.
set content view is the on start method instead of on create, right?
This one.
And
Sorry, this
set
one, right?
content, yes, because we view is the just because we are showing on the on start instead of on create. So is that make
Good
sense or
question.
is mandate here?
No, no. I'm explaining. See, the question is good because all of every one of you will get to learn that things. But the thing is, the view initialization should be done on create. Why? Because we on see, the thing is we only want to connect with this XML view only once throughout the life cycle of the activity. Okay, this XML view will should be only called once for the setting the activity content. And you can see on create is the method that is called only once. If we initialize it in on start, okay, let's say if we initialize it on on start, and then you can see from the on stop, it is again calling the on start, right? This is a cycle. See, you can see. So that means if even if our activity is just not visible and it becomes visible again, the view initialization will again occurred, right? So that is something we don't want. We only want to initialize the view for a once. That is the point. That's why we are creating, we are calling that things inside the on create, because on create will be only called once throughout the life cycle of the
Okay.
activity.
So does that mean that view will not be created again once it's set once?
Yes, same view will be reused. It will be only created once inside the on create.
Okay.
Sir, is it not good to create it again and again because it frees up the memory? As we are
Yes,
creating it once,
definitely.
so it will keep the it will block the memory for the whole lifeline of the app for the whole.
Yes, it could block, it could take memories as well. And again, the memory is another thing, it could take. But the thing is, this is kind of, we are wasting the resources, right? The things we should done only once, we are creating it again and again. That means we are wasting the memory, we are wasting the CPU. And so that is something we don't want. So let me give you an example. So let's say on this click counter, I am let's say stopping the activity, and again I'm navigating back to the activity. So on start will be called, right? So if I do these things again and again and again, the view initialization will occur again and again. And this is kinds of a bit heavy process. So we should definitely don't want to do these things. We only want to connect with the view once. That's why we are writing it inside the on create. Okay.
Okay, Raj, thank you.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks.
And what about the saved instant state bundle?
That is a different topic. We'll discuss that later. Okay.
Okay.
We'll discuss that things as well. Bundle and saved instance state and all those things.
So
Uh,
people
So,
here give you
just
questions
wanted to
like
add,
okay.
once
One,
you
one, one at a time, please. Okay. Okay. Meenal, please. Yes, you can go.
okay, so I just have a question like once we rotate the screen, we are on the login page and we are in the portrait mode and we have entered
Mm-hmm.
the username and the password and all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden we just rotate the screen. So what happens in
Mm.
that case? Like view will be recreated or the previous instance of the activity will be destroyed? Like
Yes,
how
the entire activity will be destroyed. So view must needs to recreate it. The entire activity will be destroyed.
because the portrait is getting changed to landscape. That is why.
Yes. Whenever the config change, be it orientation changes or let's say theme changes from light to dark mode, those kinds of things. So in this case, the activity will get destroyed. So on the new view, on the view will be created again because the on create will get called.
Okay, so on
Or
create get called again in that case, right?
yes, whenever activity is entirely, see, on create will be only called when the activity is created freshly, or like activity is created for the kinds of a first time. So whenever we call, when we rotate the device, the activity will get destroyed. So if it get destroyed, it Android system will need to recreate that instance. So Android system will again call the on create method. But the thing is, at this time Android system knows that activity was there, but there was config changes. So what it will do, it will pass some data in forms of intents, and that you can use to determine that okay, my activity was previously on in this what to say, or portrait mode, and now it is in a landscape mode. Yeah, you can make use of some datas.
Okay, so in that
That
case, will it be still showing the same content which the user entered, like username and password?
no, that is the thing.
Okay.
The data will be lost, right? If you don't use
Oh,
a view model, that yes, someone was speaking something.
no, no, it's me.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that is a definitely a good use case to understand these things. If you don't use a view model, and if you see these things, let's say orientation changes occurs, you will lose the data because the activity is created again.
Okay.
Okay, you'll
So
lose
is
the
there any
data.
other way out if we want to save the data? once we change the orientation?
Yes, there are. So your question is, let's say when orientation changes occurs, you want to save the data, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are various ways you can use something called a view model is a one solution because it doesn't get destroyed. We all know, right? When activity get destroyed on config changes. The another things could be we have methods like on saved instance and on restore instance methods. You can basically override them. Let me see what is the mm,
Or once we'll come to the view model, then can you make me explain the scenario?
uh this one. Okay, I'll try to do that in using the view model, because using the view model is a pretty straightforward. View model doesn't get destroyed. I'll try to explain why it doesn't get destroyed even when the activity get destroyed, because this is something a lot of people don't know. What they just know is view model survives, but how it survives, that is something I'll try to explain.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, cool. Welcome. So this is the thing, yeah, what we were talking. Yes. So now let's say if another activity comes into foreground and our main activity loses the focus, uh, see, it's still visible, but it just lost the focus. So in that case time, on pause will be called. And if there is a there is a scenario that even our activity lost the focus as well as it's not even visible. So in this case, on stop will be called. And from the on stop, we have various path. Like if again user navigate back to that previous activity, on restart as well as on start will be called. And if a user destroy the activity, on destroyed will be called, and means activity will be shut down. Or you can have, let's say, if Android system decides to kill the activity, it can kill the activity again, and a user navigates to that activity again. So on create will be called. Okay, but on create will be called only once in the entire activity creation process. Okay, so let's see these things practically. I already have the practical demo. I think this is making sense for everyone. Just keep these things in mind because we'll again use it in a compose. So to explain these things, let me show you. If we yes, activity lifecycle visualizer. So this is kinds of a I created this open source project. You can just go and check it out on my GitHub. Maybe let me check it where it is available. Let me just check it out. Okay. So you can see Android tutorials, repository, and it contains two tutorials. Internet is okay. So it contains two tutorials. First is activity lifecycle visualizer, as well as if you want to pre-populate some room database. This is not related to this session, but I'm just explaining. It contains two tutorials, so you can go and check it out. Let me share the link here in the chat. And if you are not able to access the chat, are you going to join here? Are we waiting for you? Okay, there you are. Cool. Okay, so this is something I created called a activity life cycle visualizer. And just give me a sec. Wrapper is not found. Yep, because yes, I think because project level Gradle is not found. Just give me a sec. Open studio project. Where is the Android tutorials? Yep, cool. Let me just open it. And now I'll explain the same thing in a practical manner. Where did it went? Yes, here. You can play with this. This is open source, right? You can play with yourself as well. Let it just build and then I'll explain the things. Because why I had created these things, because I knew that people knows a bit about the theory, right? How these methods are getting called, but how to actually see that inside the Android emulator or Android device, how to feel that things. So to issue that to address that issue, I have created this visualizer kind of things. So let it build and then I'll show you. It's not getting boring, right? Is it? Just let me
No,
know.
no.
Okay, cool. Nice to hear, man. If it's getting boring, just stop me and let me know.
No, no,
Mm,
we are getting very much useful information.
uh, Thank you, Minal. Thanks. Uh, yep. Let's build it. Mm, it's taking time. Maybe should be completed in a minute. This is made 03. Let me just close it. Android tutorials. Yep, cool. Build finish, right? So okay, so we have this activity, this one. So I'll explain the code as well, but let me first run it so you can see the UI directly, and then I'll explain the code and how the lifecycle works. Okay, Gradle build is running. Let's go build. And by the way, one thing to note here is if you use the Android Studio stable version, your UI will be different because this is based on the new UI that is powered by the JetBrains IntelliJ IDEA. So if you use a you will find, if you use a stable version that is Flamingo, you will find a bit of outdated UI. That is the current UI, but this is the future UI that Android Studio is getting. Okay, so I find it nice, so I have enabled it. If you want to change it, you can just go to settings and you can disable this enable new UI option. So if I disable it, it will again revert to the old UI. Okay, so this is our activity, and now what we understood by this theory is see, let me give you a hint. So what these things will be doing, whenever the activity state changes, I am showing some toast. Okay, what is a toast? Toast is nothing but just a message that we can show when any activity is open in our application. Okay, you can show toast is a kind of a simple message that you want to show to users. So whenever the activity state change from on create or on start or on resume or on pause, whatever, we are just showing some toast. You can see this show toast. This is something I have created. I'll explain the code, but this is what we want to achieve. Whenever the activity state change, we want to show some toast. So by this theory, what we understand is on create will be called, and then Android system will quickly call the on start, and then it will quickly call the on resume. So when we launch our activity, we should see three toast, right? On create, on start, and on resume, right? So let's focus on this emulator and let's see if we are seeing that toast or not. Let's focus here on this emulator only. So you can see on create, on start, and on resume. These three things are called, right? These three methods are called. There is no on stop or on pause. Let me hide the logcat so you will have a more idea. Sorry, let me hide the tool window. So now you will have a more idea on these things. So it will call the on create and then on start. See, on create, on start, on resume. So these three methods are called, right? In on create, system created the activity. In on start, system started the activity. UI is visible but not interactable. And in the on resume, this is, by the way, this is method provided by the activity itself, right? So you can override them. Override, I believe every one of you know, just a runtime polymorphism. That is something we refer with the override, or you can say DMD, dynamic method dispatch. Let's not confuse you with some buzzwords. It's just simple method overriding. Okay, so you can see these three methods getting called on create, on start, and on resume. Now our activity is running. This activity is running, right? So now what we want, let's say we want to trigger this on pause method. How we can trigger that? So we know that whenever whenever some new component overlaps on our activity, that means our activity is still visible in the background, but it lost the the as of now, see, as of now the focus is on our this main activity, this one, right? This main activity. Now what we want, what we want to do, we want to show something, some activity or some fragment or whatever. We want to show something that has the focus, and our main activity lost the focus, but our main activity is still visible in the background. So in that case, on pose will be called, right? So how we can achieve that? Let's click on this I button. So you can see this button will start a new dialog activity and will trigger on pause lifecycle state, because the caller activity UI will be visible in the background. So what is a dialog activity? Dialog activity is basically, it's just an activity, but inside the manifest file I have provided the theme as a dialog theme. Okay, you can see a theme as a dialog. So what is the manifest file? So manifest file is a must have file for every Android application. It contains all the activity information, all the intent filter information, all the services, all the broadcast, whatever permission you are using. Let's say you want to use some context on the device, or you want to use location permission, all the permission we need to define here, Android manifest. And who will use this Android manifest file? So the Android system running on the device will make use of this Android manifest file to know more about the application when we are installing the application. Okay, so Android when you install any application, Android system will show you the application name, application size, and all those things, right? So basically it reads out the manifest file to see what we want, what permission we use, and all those things. So that is a bit off track about the manifest, but I have created another activity called a dialogue activity. It's just a regular activity, but the theme is a dialogue. So dialogue theme means how to differentiate. Let's say, let me show you. This is the regular activity, right? So, and inside our device, and this is another device. The dialogue activity will look something like this one, just like a dialogue. Okay, it's still an activity, but it's just like a dialogue. It's not capturing the whole screen. It's just capturing a few portion of the screen. So if we somehow show the dialogue activity, let me remove these things. Okay, this is our main activity, and if we somehow show our dialog activity over the main activity, that means these things is still visible, right? But now the focus is on the dialog activity. So that is something we are doing with these things. So it will open the dialog activity, and that means this, let me give it a name called main activity, and let's say this is a dialog activity. So that if I open this activity, that means this activity will be still visible, but the focus will goes to dialog activity. Let's check it out. So in this case, this main activity will lose the focus. So on pause method, on we are not talking about the lifecycle method of this activity. We are talking about the main activity only. So on pause method should be called, right? Let's click on this. Cool. You can see on pause is called, right? Because we have created a new activity. Now this main activity is visible in the background, but the focus is on the dialog activity. So the on pause for this activity is getting called. You can see this is a dialog activity, and starting it will only trigger the on pause lifecycle state, but not the on stop. Why? Because the caller activity, that is main activity, is still visible in the background. Okay. Okay. Till now everyone is fine, right? Now let's say
Yes,
we
yes.
press. Yes, someone is asking something.
No, I said it's fine.
Okay, cool, fine. So okay, so now you can see these things is visible, and now we want to, let's say we want to press the back button. So that means we are returning to our activity, main activity. So what should be called? On resume will be called for this activity. Let's press the back button. On resume is called, right? Now the focus is on the main activity, so on resume is called this one. Okay, we have covered till this path: on create, on start, on resume, and on pause. This is something we have simulated and we know how it works. Now we want to go to these steps as well. So now what should we do to achieve the on stop? The conditions must be satisfied. Like activity should lose the focus, as well as it should not even be visible. So if it's not visible, that means it or lost the focus, right? So in earlier case, what was happening? Activity was visible but lost the focus. In this case, we don't even want to show that activity. We just want to make it invisible. So what we will do is let's click on this button. So this button will start a new system image picker and will trigger on pause and on stop method. So what we want to do is we want to somehow we want to somehow start another activity, be it some system activity or some system image picker, whatever. Basically, we just want to hide this activity. So that means on pause, as well as now, as of now, it's in on resume state. So on pause as well as on stop will be called. So let's click on this button. Yep. Okay. So okay. So this method is not called because I have written the code to open the system image picker, but there is no image picker to open on this system, right? So that's why it's giving this dialog. I have handled that condition as well. Let me just uh, show you the code. Buttons and info, trigger on stop. Yes. On button, click select image. Yes, so you can see no app found okay. So basically what it does is it is basically it basically kinds of a start what to say, system image picker, but there is no image picker available on this device. So that's why it's just showing the toast. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll try to change it to other things, let's say some browsers, or I'll try to use some kinds of thing that is available on all the device, let's say to some call application or whatever that is I'll try to open things that should be available on all device, because this is open source code, right? So it should run everywhere. So I'll change these things, and then I'll later show you tomorrow how it works. But basically the idea is if we navigate from this activity to other activity without destroying these things, on pause and on stop will be called. Let me try to run it. Maybe in this device I have that thing. Let me just show you so you can have more idea on that as well. uh, Pixel API 28. Where did it went? Let me just close it and run this thing. Okay, starting AVD. What happened? Why it's terminated? I think there is some issue with my AVD. Maybe. Let's see.
Well, you can
Device.
open another activity if you want to make that.
Yes, we can do that as well. But let me just check it out. This one to see if it works or not. Otherwise, we can go with that. My concern is we can you open any activity and that will do. But the things is any activity that we are opening should be for this use case, for this session it will be fine. But this is open source code, so I want to use show something like that is available on the device. Let me see, because the system picker should be available. I'm not sure why it's not available on Android T. Maybe due to this new media store APIs. But let's check it out. Connecting to the emulator is not working. Or
You can open
let's okay.
settings.
Yes. Let's go with this one only. Let's open settings maybe. Let's change the code or open whatever applications we have. Let's see what we have inside this device. We have browser, right? What we have here, we have the caller activity. Uh, uh, just a sec.
For this one, especially for on pause and on stop, we can click on home button also. If you click on home button, it won't destroy, right? Activity.
Uh,
Is
yep, yep. Yeah,
that we
if
can
you
do.
click. Okay, good. Let's run that as well. And let's say on create and on start, let's press the home button. Let's say on resume, let's press the home button. Okay, so you can see on pause as well as yes, on stop is not getting called. Why? Let's check it out. I think activity is still not visible. It should show. Nice addition, whoever suggested that as well, thanks. But I think to navigate from this one, we should, if we move to another activity, then it should perfectly trigger the on pause and on stop. On pause, as of now, only on pause is getting called, right? So we have the settings activity. Let me just quickly see Android open setting active. I can set the package name as well, but let's try to do it through the intents. We don't want for a result, right? We don't want any result. So let's see. Let's simply call these things start activity for a result. New, we don't need it. What is this? uh, Required activity uh, intent or intent action provider settings, action settings. We can just start the activity, right, without calling the start activity for the result. Let me remove this code. This one, start activity. Where we are in the utility, right? So context dot start activity. This should be fine. We don't want any result. Let's run it and see if it works or not. Okay, so we are on these things. It should call on stop as well as on pause. Let me finish this toast and then we'll move on to the setting. Okay, on stop. So you can see on pause is called as well as on stop. Why not on stop? Mm, it should call on stop. Maybe because it was working perfectly fine. And even that activity is not visible as well. You can see in the, I think the activity is no longer visible, so it should call on stop. But maybe let's see. Okay, let's see. The toast is something is not always reliable. Okay, so we have another things to help us as well. We have where did it went? Yes, we are logging the things as well. So let's see if the logcat is working fine. Let's say toast is not always reliable to check the things, right? So let's move on to the settings on stop. Okay, fine. See, you can see on pause and on stop is called, right? So that's fine. That is working fine. And even for the home screen, it should call both of these things. So even if you go to the home screen, let's validate via the loggings. Okay, we are logging as well as we are showing the toast. So let's
So
say
if the toast is so if the toast is before the on stop.
just give me a sec. Okay, so let's say if I go to the home screen, you can see on pause and on stops are called, right? So on stop, so the toast is not reliable, it's not showing, but you can see the on stop and on pause and on stop, both of the methods are called when we navigated to the home screen. So that is fine. Your activity is not in the foreground as well as it's no longer visible. So both of these on pause and on stop will be called. So as you can see, both of these things are getting called. Okay, we have covered these things. So now if we again open that things, we haven't implemented the on restart, so that you won't see. But if you implement that things, you can see that as well. So from the on stop, it should open on restart as well as on start. So let's do that as well. Let's implement it so you can have an idea. On stop, and then let's say override fun on restart, and let's do something like this one. So if activity is stopped, if it's see these the interviewers can sometimes ask you these tricky questions. So from the on pause it will go to on resume, from the on stop it will go to on restart, and then again then on start. So let's see these things in action. Mm,
I think the
let's run
toast
it.
is, I have a
just
point.
just
I
give me
think,
just give me a sec related. Yes, someone was speaking something.
yeah, I think the toast will be displayed if you call the super dot on start after showing the toast message
Mm, this one.
in the on stop.
Okay, so super call is there.
In
So
the
you are
on stop.
asking me to do something like this one.
Yeah, in the on stop method. On stop.
Just a sec. On stop.
Yeah,
So
yeah. The super dot on stop.
I should do these things.
Yeah.
Mm, okay. Yep. So that could be good as well because we are calling the up, what to say, parents method after showing the toast. So let's validate it later. But let's first go to the home screen. So you can see on pause and on stops are called, right? This on stops is called, and now it should call on restart, on start, and on resume. So let's again open it. Cool. On restart, on start, and on resume, right? So you can see all these three, the flow is working perfectly. So this is how it works. So now let's validate this stop things and this what to say, toast thing. And let's say on start and on resume. So let me go back. So you can see on pause. Okay, so still the toast is not being shown, right? Because even if we call the parent a method after showing the toast, I think it's not work. Yes, it's not working, right? Maybe this is the case with the destroy as well. Even when your activity is destroyed, you should not get the toast. So the same things work here as well. Sometimes see this on stop was even with this configuration, calling the super class constructor first, sorry, super class method first, and then showing the toast was working for some devices, let's say API 28, but not working in API 33. So maybe that could be a change. Okay, so we have covered this on stop as well as on restart. So the last remaining thing is a on destroyed method. So let's run these things. And on destroyed simply means we just want to kill the activity. Okay, we just want to finish the activity. So you can see this button will destroy the caller activity and it will trigger the on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So if you kill the activity, it simply doesn't mean it will just call these things. It will flow. The flow will be in this hierarchy: on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So let's go to logcats and let's click on this button. Activity is destroyed, on pause, on stop, and on destroyed, right? So this is how the flow is working and this is how activity works. Now activity is shut down. So this is a kinds of a bit of a visualizer to help you see how the things works. And this is the code. You can go and check it out. Basically, this is something I've written in a compose. The UI is just in compose, but the methods are overridden in the regular your main activity. So that should be fine as well. On resume, on pause, on stop, on restart, and on destroy. We have a lot of other methods to override, but these 7 are the pretty standard activity lifecycle methods. Okay, so this is how the things works, and this is a bit about the activity. And now we have covered more than half an hour compared to what was our initial plan, 9 to 10 p.m. So okay, so we'll stop here, and now we will be open to Q&A. If anyone has any questions, we'll take the question, and tomorrow we'll see what is the intent and what is the bundles and all those things. Okay, so I'll stop here. If anyone has any question, you may ask so. This is kinds of a Q&A session.
The toast uses the context. So I think The on-stop context is no longer valid, and that's the reason toast is not being
Uh,
displayed.
yep.
That be case, yeah.
That could be the same case with the on destroyed. The context is
Right.
no longer valid. So
Yeah.
okay, cool. Thank you. Anyone else? Any question on anything?
Sir, what is the difference between view binding and data binding?
Yep. So view binding is a one way, data binding is a two way. So how it differs, let me show you that thing. So in these things we have used a view binding, right? Let me just give this. Yes, we have used the view binding. So in a view binding, you are just binding your view. That means you will have access to your view and now you can do whatever you want. This is a one way. You are just generating a class that is binding with your view. So whenever you want to update the view, you need to explicitly do it. Okay, so let's say when I click on this button, what I want to update the text of my text view. So I need to write this code inside the on click listener. That means whenever I click on this button, it should update the text. It's just a one way binding. You just bind with your view. Okay, you are not binding any data to it. So it's a one way binding. So data binding is a two way binding. And what does that mean is if you use the data binding, here what you will do, usually what people do is they have, let's say, some variable to keep it simple. That means you don't need these lines. That means what you do is you have access to your views, as well as you bind your counter variable to, let's say, text view. You bind this counter some way, something. No, I'm just trying to explain the things. Okay, you write something like this, bind to counter. So now you don't need these lines. Whenever you click on this button and the counter will get updated, that means your data is get updated and your view will automatically get updated. That is known as the data binding. So data binding means you are just binding your data with your view. So you don't need to manually update your view. And whenever your data is updated, your view will get updated as well. Okay.
Okay, so which one is a good practice?
Uh, it depends. See, there is no things like a good practice between view binding and data binding, because it depends on your use case. If you want three things to keep in mind. If you are using XML, you have view binding as well as data binding. If you are Compose, then you don't need to worry, because Compose is automatically state driven. So Compose is kinds of, you can say Compose is a advanced version of the data binding. Okay, so if you just want to create a views, if you just want to use a type safe views, just like this. Type safe means if I write by mistakenly, let's say I have added one. Okay, so it will give me error, because this generated class has no property called my button view. So I want it will give me a compile time error. So I need to call this my button. That means I can safely access this type. So if you just want to type safe access to your views, go with the view binding. But if you want to bind some data with that view as well, okay, so to simplify the process, let's say if you have some data in your view model and you want to bind the data with your view, so in that case you go with the data binding. Okay, it all depends on your requirement. But the thing is, another thing is a data binding is this is a side track a bit of. So the data binding depends on something called a KAPT, right? uh, Kotlin annotation processor, KAPT. So this data binding depends on the KAPT, and the Kotlin team announced that they are putting the KAPT in a maintenance mode. That means there won't be any new feature, there won't be any new things, because now the Kotlin is moving to KSP, that is generated by the Google. Sorry, that is created by the Google. It is known as a Kotlin symbol processor. Okay, so this is kinds of going to be official symbol processor for the Kotlin, and it is written by the Google with the help of some JetBrains Fox. So this KAPT was created because there was no annotation processor for the Kotlin. So just for the sake of helping the developers, this KAPT was created, right? But as of now, we have better alternatives. KAPT has its own problems, so that's why we need a KSP. So now KAPT is in maintenance mode and data binding is using KAPT. So I believe data binding has a no good future until and unless they somehow move it to KSP.
Just
Okay.
So
I
what extra benefits can we get from using KSP instead of KPT?
The thing, okay, so the thing is, if you use a KAPT, it has a, to put it simply, it has two steps. Let's say it's a annotation processor. What is annotation? So annotation is, I believe everyone you know, right? Let me add something here, like let's say volatile. So this is an annotation, right? So if you use a KAPT for the Kotlin code, what it will do, it will create a Java stub based on this annotation, and then it will convert to the Kotlin. Okay, so that is the things with the KAPT. But the things with the KSP is a Kotlin native. So if you use any annotation, like let's say volatile, I'm just giving you an example. So if you use any annotation, so KSP will directly generate the Kotlin code for that things. So intermediate Java stub is removed in the KSP. So that means KSP is almost twice faster compared to the KAPT. As well as another benefit is KSP is a whole Kotlin thing, right? So it understands Kotlin synthetics well, is it understands Kotlin language features well. So if you want to build any compiler plugin for the Kotlin, KSP is a good option for you. Okay.
Okay, Rajesh, can you brief
Yes.
which type of operation we should perform on which method?
Sorry.
Like we are talking about activity lifecycle, right? So which type
Yes.
of operation we should perform on which method? Like if you have added the click listener on the button, right? So is that okay to put on the on create, or we should go with the origin method to add the click listeners of the UI?
Okay, cool. Got the question. Just give me a sec. Where is tutorials? Yep, here. Uh, no, not this one, right? Okay, fine. So yes, see, when we added a click listener, that is, yes, my activity here. When we added the click listener, you should go for the on create, because what this means is we are, see, when we add the click listener inside the on create, that doesn't mean we are executing this code. We are just binding this click listener to this button. And again, we just want to do that things only for a once. Okay, so that's why we are putting, just like creating a UI, we want to bind this click listener inside the on create, because we just want to execute it once. So if you have these kinds of events, or if you want to do something exactly once, you can write that inside the on create. And for the on start and on resume, let me give you an example. So let's say if you are building an game, okay, let's say if you are building a game, or and you have some player scorecard. So when user navigate to other applications, you may want to store that whatever the score user has done. And then inside, let's say on pause or on stop, and then when user returns to your application, you again want to update the score or show the score. So you can write that inside the on start. Or and another example could be, let's say, on resume. So for the on resume, let's say you have an activity that shows the camera. Okay, so now what you want ideally is when your application goes in the background, you don't want to hold that camera, and you want to release it so other applications can use it. When user again open your application, that is fine, you get the access to camera. But when you are in the background, you don't want to hold that things. So that code you can write inside the on resume. That means whenever your activity is resume state, just get access to camera. And whenever it goes to the post state, just release the camera so other applications can use it. This could be a few use cases. Okay. let's say how it feels. Let's say I'm using WhatsApp, and I have called the I have selected the camera button to send some photo to my contacts. Now I move on to the home screen, and I click on the story button to capture some reels. So how it feels if Instagram is not able to access the camera because WhatsApp is holding it? That's a bad user experience, right? So WhatsApp could do one thing. They can get the access to camera only if that activity is in a resume state, and if it goes into post state, they can release the camera so others can use it. Make sense?
Yes, Rajesh. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, cool. Any more question? We have stretched a lot. It's a 10:47, but I'm fine as long as you folks are getting some knowledge. I'm fine stretching the sessions. Okay, any more question, or are we good to wind up the call? Cool. Nice, pretty silence. So again, silence means positive response. So I'll assume that there is no question, and we'll wind up the session for today here. And tomorrow we'll discuss some more on this intents and bundle and all those things. Save the instance state as well. Okay, cool. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a good night, and for those folks who are in US, have a good day. Bye bye. Take care.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.